Day 4 of the first Ashes test, and this is Ask George. Mark Long asks, did the TV feed get cut by an England fan trying to spare us all?
Yeah, it was like that bit when you go horse racing and you see screens put around a horse. It's not because the horse wants to change in privacy.
Johnny Stackhouse asks, is this the worst England lineup since the 90s?
I think if you go through the 90s lineup, the issue with it was that it underperformed, that actually there were some very talented players and that maybe they didn't ever produce the results they should have done. You know, Hick and Ramprakash and loads of people. Yeah, I mean, you've got to answer a question straight, haven't you? We're in a very poor age, I fear. I'm trying to be honest, but also try not to be unkind or also over the top. So I don't think the system's working at all. But I've been sort of banging on about this for a while. So I don't think we're giving people a chance to develop into the test cricketers they could be because all our emphasis is on white ball cricket.
Gareth asks, given the consistently poor batting this year, which bowler should be scapegoated?
Well, Moeen Ali, obviously. But yeah, I mean, it's just the fact that all the talk has been about the selection of Anderson and Broad. And, I thought England bowled fine. You don't win many games when you bowled out for 147 when you've chosen to bat first. That's the problem again and again and again. And they also can't catch. But that's the batters as well.
Max Edwards asks, snog, marry, avoid England's batting, bowling and fielding?
I guess the best thing about them is the bowling. Does that mean I'd marry them? And the worst thing about them is the fielding. So I guess I'd avoid that.
Jim asks, is this the most predictable collapse after promising so much?
Yeah. Oh, look, you've got a lot of competition. How many times have England scored 400 since Chennai? Twice, I think, in 19 innings. And I reckon they've been bowled out for under 200 10 or so times in that period. So it's always, England collapse is always quite predictable. I think we thought it might happen with the new ball and it happened before they took the new ball. But yes, you're never too far from an England collapse, are you?
Sean Sullivan's asking, how many chances is too many? Surely Burns and Pope must be under fire.
Bit harsh on Pope, eh? Bit harsh on Pope. I mean, wasn't he the second top scorer in the first innings? Got 35 or something. So not a great shot in the second innings, that's true. Rory Burns, I mean, look, I'm sure they'll give him another test. But yeah, it's a worry. Do you have examples of people to bring in who are going to make things better? I'm not sure about that. I really like Zach Crawley. I think his game is suited to these pitches, and I actually think he's a decent fielder as well. But, he did sort of earn his drop in, didn't he? So I think it's a bit naive to just sort of say drop these people, and we don't want to get back to that state we had in the 90s where everyone was always insecure in the side. So I think if you started the series with Rory Burns, he probably gets the second test as well.
Chris Egerton's asking, what decision have Silverwood and Root got right this year?
Oh, crikey, that's a question. Well, look, they got to the World Cup semi-final of the T20, and if they had won the toss in that game, I think they probably would have won it. So there was a time when we would be quite pleased if England's side got to World Cup semi-finals. In terms of the other stuff, I mean, the big problem they've had this year is they've played against really good sides, which hasn't been the case in previous years. So, they have played against India twice, New Zealand, and now Australia. That's tough. I mean, that is really tough. I guess the question I would ask, Chris, is to turn it back and say, who would have made better decisions, I think. Their positions, no doubt, will come under scrutiny, but I'm not absolutely sure that... Chris Silverwood in particular, I just don't think he's been dealt a handful of aces. See, I wouldn't have got rid of Peter Moores all that time ago. And sometimes you just have to accept that English cricket's not particularly strong. Sometimes it almost doesn't matter what lineup you put out. It's going to maybe be beaten. So I think Chris Silverwood's had a really, really tough time of things. And I think quite a lot of what he's doing seems sensible and brave, but he hasn't been very lucky. So the question I guess I'd ask, a genuine question, is if you replaced him, do you firstly who with, and do you think things would be better? It's become Ask Chris.
Ask Chris.
Hasn't it?
Yeah, it has become Ask Chris.
Hashtag. Yeah.
Should we we'll get him on next the second test?
We should. He'll do much better than me.
IZ asks, could Chris Wokes feasibly bat higher up the order?
In Australia, listen, I love Chris Wokes, but he doesn't love the short ball, does he? So I'm not sure about that. I mean, Brisbane's a pretty tough place to bat, but if you're struggling with bounce and stuff, it's obviously very difficult. He's got a decent technique and all the rest of it, but and he made his test debut as a number 6. I don't know if people remember that in 2013. 6 seems a bit high, doesn't it? He'd be all right at 7.
Paul Frame asks, at what point do Australia start limiting Ashes tours to 3 tests?
Well, the honest answer is when it stops selling, because that's obviously what it's all about. But yeah, I think I probably agree with the premise that 5 test tours are a bit long. In this day and age, personally, I think 3 is plenty. Is that sacrilege? It probably is best not to judge on Brisbane because it's so hard to get into Queensland, hence why I'm in Sydney. I mean, it didn't sell very many tickets, did it? You know, it didn't look very good. The Big Bash doesn't look very good either. Not quite sure in terms of ticket sales what's going on with cricket and popularity here and how much is related to COVID. But I think Paul raises a reasonable question. Also, England have now lost 10 out of 11 of their last tests in Australia. At some stage, maybe the broadcasters will say, what's the point in this?
Well, presumably when the world opens up a bit again, though, it's a case of English tourism going out to Australia as well, and 5 tests gives more opportunity for more spend. Sure,
I mean the English travelling supporters are absolutely incredible and come in such fantastic numbers everywhere, really. But these are huge grounds, and you would expect them to be full of Australian supporters, usually for an Ashes game. I don't know. It's probably too early to be worried, as I say, because the COVID situation has made travel between states very, very difficult. And who knows how many people normally come from, say, Brisbane or from out of state. I don't know the answer to that. But it is possible it's a reflection of a lack of competition in the series. I mean, you and I noticed, didn't we, on the 3rd day, you know, we had a lot less interest from overnight from England supporters because I think quite a few people felt, you know, they'd invested this hope and then they were just tired and they couldn't see any point, which is entirely understandable. So, you know, Paul's question is completely reasonable. Personally, I think 5 test series are too much. Another example would be when England go to India. Do we really need to see England beaten in India over 5 tests again? I mean, these things are only done for the money, and I think that's quite short term.